Do you know, if you go back and listen to my episode 1, go on back and listen to it. I actually published it in this feed, republished it on International Podcast Day last year, because it's amazing how far you come as a podcaster. Not in terms of quality necessarily, not only in terms of quality or just in terms of how you develop your ideas, but in particular, what I'm talking about here is how far you come in terms of confidence. And in particular, one thing I want to focus on today is how you become more confident with your own voice. It's something that a brand new friend of mine brought up at Podcast Movement Evolutions last week. So we are going to dig into that here on the Podcast Accelerator today. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media, where we make all sorts of podcasting goodness, including Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. And a little cheeky reminder that the show is brought to you by AWeber, the world's #1 email marketing platform. That's right, email marketing, when I can say it. The world's #1 email marketing platform, where I choose to place my trust, where I choose to build my email list and build my own community and interact with my audience. And I believe you should be doing the same as a podcaster. You can go and check it out 30 days free at markasquith.com/AWeber. Now, I'm here recording the Podcast Accelerator in a San Diego park. We are just about to hit up our Airbnb, and we're here for Social Media Marketing World, and before we head out to Podfest over in Orlando. Then we'll be back in San Diego for Traffic and Conversion Summit. We actually just landed from Los Angeles on the Pacific Surfliner, and it's interesting because I'm recording this in a park. I'm recording this in a park in San Diego, and the weather is beating down. And the reason I'm saying that is that if you hear people driving past, if you hear people walking the dog, if you hear people on cycles or scooters, as really common out here, if you hear the wind blowing through the microphone, that's all good. It just shows the power of podcasting. We can do this from anywhere. Now, I've been in Los Angeles, as I mentioned. I've been at Podcast Movement Evolutions, which is the inaugural event in LA. And I think it'll be in LA next year as well. It seems like, the industry's in LA, the industry's in New York, in LA, and I can't see them revolving Podcast Movement Evolutions like they do the main event in August. So, the first event was really interesting. I've got some thoughts on that coming down the wire on Friday this week. There were a couple of interesting announcements out there, which I'm going to talk about on Wednesday. And like I said, I'm going to kind of reflect on Podcast Movement Evolutions on Friday. But this episode is about a promise, because I promised a new friend of mine. I met a fantastic girl called Priya out in the hallways of Podcast Movement Evolutions, where very often some of the greatest conversations take place. I've had some wonderful ones, of course, this week in the hallways of the Millennium Biltmore Hotel, which is where Ghostbusters was filmed randomly. So big geek fact there. And Priya came up to me. She said, I saw you talk. I really enjoyed your talk. And it got me thinking, I'm really keen on launching my podcast. I'm full of beans. And I could tell that she was full of beans. She was really, really keen on launching a show. She had a wonderful personal brand. She had a wonderful set of ideas. And she was just generally a wonderfully exuberant and very, very positive person. But she said to me, Mark, look, I'm really worried about putting my show out there. And I said, well, why is that, Priya? What's the sitch? And she said, honestly, I'm concerned about hearing my own voice back. And in particular, putting my own voice out there for the very first time and not being able to hide behind anything else. You put it out on a blog, it's words on a page. It's not you with your inflections and your tone and you as your personality. Sure, you can try and imbue as much as that personality as you can into your blog post, but ultimately, if you're doing something like video or you're doing something like podcasting, that is absolutely personally you. And it got me thinking. I said to her, look, Priya, I'll do an episode on this on Monday for you. So, Priya, here I am. This one's for you. And it got me thinking back to my first episode, which was recorded in early September 2014. And I launched Excellence Expected, the first interview series, on International Podcast Day, 30th of September. And of course, back in the day, we didn't have trailers. We didn't have any of that stuff. I did the usual episode 0 that some people are still doing, which is, I don't think you need that. That's crazy. And I listened back to it. I put it out on International Podcast Day last year, 2019, 5 years later. And I put it back and wow. I'm a robot. I am a robot. And you know me. That ain't me. That ain't me. That's not me. I'm a little bit more free-flowing than that. I'm a little bit more chill than that. And a little bit more forward-thinking, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more straight-talking, and a little bit hyper than that. And I completely understood where Priya was coming from, because that version of me, that robotic kind of, hi, My name is Mark Asquith. This is Excellence Expected, the straight-talking business show brought to you from the United Kingdom. Like, that version of me was me not really doing my karaoke podcast. And what I mean by karaoke podcast is that, you know, when you're on karaoke, we've talked about this before, you know, when you're on karaoke, like, you just about get into it. And to everyone else looking at you on stage, if you are just about getting into it, like, you look like you can't be bothered. But if you on stage go wild in terms of how you feel you're doing, so if you believe that you're going absolutely nuts on karaoke, to the outside world looking in, you're probably just about doing enough. And that's what I call the karaoke podcast, in that if you're podcasting, you know, like now I'm articulating, I'm gesticulating, I'm like, you know, I'm in this park in San Diego, ready to check into the Airbnb. I can see the wonderful bridge over to Coronado. I'm sat here with, there's a guy walking his dog with his girlfriend. There's a couple of people on the benches. There are people working. There are people drinking down at the bar. And I'm just here, like, going wild into my podcast, arms everywhere, head everywhere. And to you, the listener, you can't see that. You can't feel that unless I do it. And that's what I would say to you first of all, Priya, is that, look, it's really difficult to understand that you don't have to worry about what people think, because the second that you start getting animated is the second that people start getting invested in you. That's honestly the second that people start getting invested, because they can hear the animation in your voice. They can hear how you are articulating things and the energy that you're putting into it. So believe me, Priya, the people who are going to be listening, they're tuning in for you. Like, they aren't judging you. They're tuning in for you. And the more you get into it, the more they can learn to know you. And the more they know you, the more they like you, the more they trust you, and so on and so forth. You know, classic marketing jive. And this is the big thing that I'd suggest. You know, if you feel like you are just about putting 100% in, you're probably really putting like 60, 70, 75% in. The second you feel like you're putting 120 in, the second you feel like you're putting 120 in, then you're just about hitting 90. So you've really got to get into this, you know, you've really got to push these boundaries of articulation and animation in your voice. And the only way to do that is to get into what you're saying. And that's why it's so important to build a podcast around something that you love or you enjoy or that you're deep into or that you're an expert in, because you can get into it. You're not struggling and scrapping around. You can think on your feet. You can move fast. You know, this is not something that you are going to struggle for context or content with. So you can, like I said, you can really get deep into this, and you can really make sure that that articulation, that animation, that exuberance is there. And Priya, you know, to your point that we raised in the corridor at Podcast Movement Evolutions back there in the Millennium Biltmore, to the point around, wow, I don't like hearing my voice back. Well, look, honestly, no one does. Even now, I don't like hearing my voice back. You know, I'll go into the studio back in Sheffield, Rebel Base Media Studios, podcast studio, right there in Sheffield, and I'll say, hey guys, welcome to the Podcast Accelerator. And the team take the mick out of me. Kieran winds me up. Sam winds me up. Ed, Ethan, Pierre, James, they all wind me up about it. They're like, hey, welcome to the Podcast Accelerator. You know, they'll give me some stick about it, because it's me putting all of my energy into it. And in order to do that, you've got to get comfortable with people who are around you, just kind of embracing that and diving into that with you, and it becoming a thing that you do, and then listening back to it. Like I said, you know, even listening back to this, it's going to freak me out. Oh my God, is that really how I sound? You know, is that the Barnsley accent coming out? Which bit of it did I drop my H's like I do because I'm from town? What is it that I don't like about it? And ultimately, it's just because it's kind of weird, you know, it's a bit of a insecurity thing, like, oh, I'm putting myself out there and I can critique myself. It's like seeing yourself on video, but ultimately you do get used to it, Priya. So what I'd say with that is that, do you know what? You can't do anything about that but become comfortable. Like, you either get comfortable or stop, and I know you don't want to stop. So just get comfortable with it. It exists. That is what you sound like. It's all good. It's fine. You sound great. All right? So there are just some quick thoughts on what it means to become comfortable with your voice as a new podcaster. And for anyone else out there that's struggling with it, even veteran podcasters, I do believe many veteran podcasters can put a lot more animation, a lot more inflection, a lot more energy into their voices, into their performances as a podcaster, because we are performing ultimately. This is a performance, and every time you hit record, you need to turn up to perform too. So Priya, honestly, we got your back. I got your back. If you need anything, you know where I am. You've got my email address. For anyone else that's struggling with this, just do it. I believe in you. I know that everyone else believes in you, and we're all here to support you. Remember, we're here to support you. We're here to listen to your show and support you, all right? No one's there to trash you, so please do your thing. You got this. And until the next time, thank you for joining me. Do check out Captivate.fm for your podcast hosting, analytics, and marketing needs. And until the next time, never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.